Good evening, all, and thank you for attending this session. Now, this topic is about Android development. It's a relatively new topic with regards to the industry. Android hasn't been out for just, I think, like 5 years. And in terms of where it is right now, it is a very, very interesting topic since, as you know, our world is moving now towards a more mobile. It's now a more mobile world, and Android is a key player in that world. So it is to our benefit as developers, as IT people, that we have a very good grasp of what Android is and how we can join in this growth. Okay, so um, before we start, I'd like to know though, just like to get a feel of where you guys are with regards to this technology. First of all, how many of you guys own smartphones? Can you guys raise your hand? Okay, I would guess almost every person here. Okay, how many of you have iOS phones or iPhones? Ah, I don't like you people. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. How many of you guys have Blackberries? Not so much, okay? Which it's a bit interesting because the percentages that you see of the people raising their hands per phones here would somehow reflect things going on wider in the world. How many of you guys still have Nokias? Ah, the stalwarts. Okay. All right. How many of you guys have Androids? Okay, significantly more. All right. Now, I'll conduct another poll. How many of you guys are developers? Ah, very, very. I'd like to see that. I like that many show of hands. Java developers. Very good. Okay. C developers or any other programming language. Okay. All right, so I guess it's safe to say that large part Android, large part Java devs. Okay, now let's go on. The topic I'm going to talk about tonight will be first of all split in two. I'll discuss. We all hear about Android. We hear about it as a product. We hear about it in the news. We see it in the various stores that we go to when we shop for smartphones. Okay, but I will give you a quick background on the history of Android and what it has accomplished and where it is now. And on the second part of this, I'll discuss actually developing applications for Android, because the reason why smartphones are where they are now is because the concept of a smartphone has managed to transform something as simple as a device that we use to send messages and call people into something that is actually a platform now. Okay, so to begin, now what exactly is Android? At its core, Android is a Linux-based operating system that was designed specifically at first for mobile devices. This was, I believe, in development as early as 2004, 2005. By the Android company. Okay, so Android before was a separate company before it was bought by Google. Okay, now the first commercial release of an Android device was the T-Mobile G1. Okay, this was released way back in 2008. Actually, it's not way back. It's just barely almost 5 years ago. So just 5 years ago, it's hard to imagine. When was the iPhone released? What year? The first iPhone? Anybody know? Or can you guys still remember an era where there are no where we don't have smartphones? Okay. The iPhone was when? 2007. Okay. So just 5 years ago. Okay, where the iPhone was released. A year later, the T-Mobile G1 was released, the first commercial Android phone. Now, fast forward 4 or 5 years. What's now? 2012. Okay? Android has branched off. It's still primarily an operating system for mobile devices, but not limited to just phones anymore. Does anybody know what the device in the upper left corner is? Sorry? That's an Ouya. Okay? Something that's in development right now. It's a gaming console. Okay? You now have Android presence in vehicle entertainment systems. Android presence in this is an Xperia Play, basically made by the same guys who made the portable PlayStation. Okay? Smart TVs that use Android. Okay? So it's not just an operating system for for smartphones anymore. It is a portable platform for embedded devices. And as you can see, this means that there are now more opportunities to develop applications for not just for phones, but for any of these devices. Okay? Now, who made it? The Android operating system is mostly associated with Google, but it's not just Google. While Google is at the forefront, it's actually being maintained by Google along with an entity called the Open Handset Alliance. Now, what is the Open Handset Alliance? It is a group of technology companies, mobile operators, telecommunication companies with a very noble goal, which is to create an operating system that is truly open, that will further innovation in that field. Okay? They don't want closed wall gardens. They don't want proprietary systems. They want an open system where everybody can participate, or everybody can contribute, and which will move the technology forward. Who are the members of this group? This is just a very small partial list. There are around 84 or 86 members of the Open Handset Alliance, consisting of telecom operators, hardware manufacturers, what else? Various technology and semiconductor companies. Okay? Name a big company, they're probably there. Acer, Asus, Samsung. Who else? Docomo, Nvidia. So those are all very powerful players in the industry, and they're all part of this consortium, and of this group, and they all have an interest in making sure that Android moves forward as a platform. Now, Android was released under the Apache license, so it's an open source platform. It is not a closed source platform like iOS or Windows. Okay? People can get the source codes, modify it, contribute fixes, or fork their own versions. Okay? And people have created their own versions. This is one of the beauties of open source, is that sometimes people will run off with their own innovations, and then it creates some fragmentation, but in general it's better for everybody because you get choice, you get flexibility. Okay? These are some of just the more popular variations of Android. You have AOKP, okay? Cyanogen. This is, and then this one is actually not open, but this is a Kindle Fire, Amazon's Kindle Fire. It's an ebook reader that Amazon built and sold, but was actually based on the Android platform. Okay? So one key thing that you see here is that Android is everywhere. Android is in a lot of places. Okay? And since it's everywhere, it means more opportunities for us as developers to jump into this bandwagon, and then contribute, exploit, develop. Okay? More opportunities for us. Okay? Key features. Okay? Now, how many kinds of iPhones are there? There's a very small number. Okay? Android is a system which was designed for a variety of devices, a variety of platforms. Obviously, a TV is not as big as a phone. And then even among phone manufacturers, like the humongous phones by Samsung or even their small pocket lines. So Android has been built so that it supports a variety of form factors, resolutions, and layouts. Okay, so that flexibility is built in. Okay. It supports multiple messaging and connectivity standards. Okay. Multiple user interfaces, input devices, and sensors. So same thing. Accelerometers, altimeters, game controllers, touch screens. Okay? Android has support for all of those. And if they don't, somebody will find a way to extend it and then give support to that. Okay? As standards compliant web browsers, one of the key things about any smartphone platform today is that it should have a browser which is, I'd say, desktop grade. Meaning, if you remember the old browsing experience from the older BlackBerry and Nokia phones, people won't tolerate that anymore. Okay? They want high-speed, high-fidelity graphics. They want smooth browsing experiences. They want a layout which is fast, JavaScript which renders fast in a browser. Okay? So Android provides that. Okay? Multiple media formats and codecs. Another thing I like about Android. AVIs, MP4s, AC3s, any multiple kinds of music formats or audio formats or video formats, okay? They're supported out of the box. Okay. Hardware graphics acceleration, okay? So for games, any game worth its salt today has graphic acceleration, meaning it's not just software rendering anymore. And it's based on an open standard called OpenGL. As developers, you have access to this, and this will allow you to create games which runs 30 frames per second, giving you fast frame rates, fast responsiveness. Okay. And multitasking support. Android is still one of the key features of Android is that it still has true multitasking. Okay. It's you can switch between apps, you can run background processes. Those apps will still run in the background if they have the proper permissions. So unlike some other more restricted operating systems, Android is truly multitasking. Lastly, one of the key selling points of Android is that it is very open and very extendable. Okay? In Android, if I don't like my browser, I install a new one and then I set it as default. If I don't like my home screen, my launcher, if I'm sick of grids, of icons, I can change it. Android has widgets which can show live information from a variety of sources on my home screen. If I don't like my keyboard, I can change it. Okay? If I don't like certain widgets, I can change it. Okay? So one thing, again, this extends a key theme from Android is that the users, the people who actually own the phones, are given the choice. That choice is not made for you. If there is something about Android in its default that you don't like, there's probably somebody else out there who made something that can replace it. Okay? This is one of the reasons why take an Android phone from Samsung or from HTC or from LG, and then take the stock one, the Nexus ones from Google, line them all up together. While they're all still Android, they're all different. This gives the opportunity for handset manufacturers to brand their particular phone for their particular brand. And even though they're branded differently, they look different, apps will still run across them. Okay, so if there's any feature of Android that people like, it is this. Okay, this is a very different experience from, let's say, iPhone, where the thing practically has not changed for the past 5 years. In Android, there are dozens of home launchers, dozens of keyboards, okay? Mail applications, calendar applications, music applications. Just pick and choose what you want. Okay? All right, some numbers. I only have the US numbers here, but I'd like you to think back to if you manage to see from my perspective here, the hands that were raised when I called out which kind of phones you guys have. It's roughly sort of reflects this. Android is, as of October, in the US at least, is the leading smartphone in terms of the number of subscribers. So 52% of the market in the US is Android. And I would imagine that in outside of the US, where Asian companies have more clout, this is probably a bit higher. Okay? iOS, still a strong contender, 34.6%. But take note that in the span of 5 years, in 2008, there was just one T-Mobile G1 phone, Android phone. And now you have several dozen models all running Android, which contributes to this number. Okay. iOS is a distant 34.6%, still strong. RIM, faltering down to 8.3. Microsoft is 3.6, but this still does not take into account Windows 8 RT. Okay. We have yet to see what kind of impact the Windows 8 operating system will have on the market. When the new Surface tablets come out, when the new, if and when they push Nokia to produce more Windows phones, we'll see. And then lastly, you have Symbian. While this is seems like a small number for Symbian, take note that this is just for smartphones. Symbian still dominates for feature phones. Okay. Current state. Android is now in version 4.1. The first that was released is version 1.5. Okay. And they're all named after various desserts. The first one, I believe, was donut. Next one was eclair, then froyo, then gingerbread, then honeycomb, and then 4.0 was ice cream sandwich. 4.1 is jelly bean. So this is now the latest. Okay? I believe their next iteration is going to be called key lime pie. Okay? This is going to we're gonna go back to this chart later, but this is very important. This represents in the market how many phones of a particular version there are. Now, even though Jelly Bean 4.1 is the latest, it is a very, very small fraction of the pie. Okay? So is Honeycomb, okay, which was mostly released for tablets but didn't gain much traction. It was sort of an interim release. The majority of the market is still running Gingerbread, version 2.3 and 2.4. This is very important to note. Again, if you plan on developing, this chart will be something that you'll be looking at when you consider what kind of applications you can provide and what kind of support you can provide, or what kind of apps that what kind of phones your apps will support. Okay. Slide on a few more numbers. According to Google, there are over 1 million Android phones being activated every day. So that's 1 million more potential customers that will download apps from you. There are over 675,000 applications in the Google Play Store. I won't give the iOS numbers, they're much higher. Still very impressive. There are 1.5 billion downloads a month from the Google Play Store. And to date, starting from the first phone, from the first time the phone was released, and the Google and the Android Marketplace was released, there have been 25 billion downloads total. So take note that all of these accomplishments were done in a span of 5 years. Okay? So all in all, very impressive. Okay. Now let's say we're mostly programmers here, I think. Who here is interested in learning how to develop apps? Or who here already knows how to develop apps, whether for one platform or another? Anyone? Android, iOS, web? Android, good. Okay. So, um, one nice thing about Android, and I think you can attest that, is that one very strategic decision they had when trying to design the SDK, or the software development kit for Android, was that they wanted to lower the barrier of entry. They did not want people to get intimidated developing for apps. Okay? So your core skill for developing in Android is going to be Java. I assume, sir, you're a Java developer? All right. Okay. This is not your only choice, but their Android SDK was built on top of Java, and Java is a core skill that you will need in order to develop applications. Okay. Now, it's not just Java, though. In the realm of high-performance applications, in the realms of, let's say, games, C is also a viable option. It's very rare that you'll see a pure C application. Most of the times, you'll see a combination of these two. As you know, C is one of the older, more venerable languages that we have. And why do people still use it? Because it's fast. Okay? And for example, if you are developing games, you want games to be fast. If you're developing, if you have existing business logic modules written in C, this native development kit, this allows you a way to encapsulate that logic so that you can reuse previously written C modules. Okay? If there are areas in your application that you want to be very efficient and very fast, you encapsulate that with C while leaving the rest of the code as Java. So again, it'll depend on your skills or on your need. But at the very basic, you need to Android. If you want to learn Android, it's a good reason to start learning Java. Okay. So a rundown of other skills that you need. Again, Java. Second is you have to be well versed in object-oriented programming principles. Okay. Third is XML. This is if I think any Java developer here can attest that XML is an unavoidable topic whenever you learn with anything related to development nowadays. XML is going to be there. And it's no different for Android. The configuration files, the layout files, they're all in XML. So XML is going to be something you need to learn. Fourth is web. Now, why would you need web for a mobile device? Many of the designs of the patterns that you see for developing applications rely on technologies that are built, that have been developed using web standards. Now, an application running in isolation in a phone is pretty useless. The reason why these devices are so powerful is that even though they're small, they're isolated, they have ways of communicating. And those communicating with the cloud, communicating with your servers, communicating with other devices. And knowledge of web and networking is a key factor to fully utilize the abilities of your smartphone. Okay? An application running just on the device, not talking to anything, not utilizing cloud services, not sending mail, not receiving notifications, it's of very limited value. So knowledge of web, knowledge of networking, not critical, but highly recommended. Okay. Now, next, how do you get started? Starting in something is always the most difficult. So as part of this talk, I will walk you through how the tools, walk you through the very, very quick overview of the application framework, and then I'll let you see some of the tools we have for developing and for testing, just so you can see how easy, well, at least just to remove some of the intimidation for whenever you're learning something new. How do you get started? These are the things that you need, and I think most of us will know or should be familiar with most of these. You need the Java SDK from Oracle. Okay. You need Eclipse. Well, actually, you don't need Eclipse, but I highly recommend Eclipse. Everybody here, or at least the Java devs here, probably used Eclipse before. Are there any other alternative IDEs that you have been using? Say NetBeans, or JDeveloper, or IntelliJ. Okay? So those IDEs, to some degree, all have support for Android, although Eclipse is the most open, and unlike IntelliJ, it's free. So free is good. Third is, I recommend the Eclipse plugin for Android. Okay? This will make things easier for you to develop. If you're truly hardcore, you can always go back down to Notepad and then typing Java and compiling and running Ant scripts, but save yourself the trouble and just use Eclipse and the plugin. It will make your lives easier. The fourth, and of course the most critical, is the Android SDK. Again, freely available from the Android site. So anybody who wants to start developing should look at this site right now, and then this is your main entry point for developing the Android applications. Okay. What does the Android SDK provide you? Okay. What can you do with the Android SDK out of the box? You have UI libraries and toolkits. So those widgets, tables, screens, buttons, web views, UI views, sliders, progress bars, those are all the UI toolkits. Ability to create background and asynchronous processes. Okay, is another very nice but potentially harmful feature of Android, is that you can create any background process you like. Very good for performance optimization, sometimes bad for batteries. Database and file system access. Not many of you might be familiar, but or might know, but you guys know what SQL is, or what a relational database is. Okay, things like Oracle, MySQL. Well, you have one running on your phone, on your Android phone. There is a relational database embedded on your phones, which allows you to create, allows you to have a RDBMS on your phone, store data on it, run SQL queries on it. It's a very, very powerful feature. Multimedia frameworks, graphics, and animations. Also, again, out of the box. Networking communication, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 3G. It all allows you to have access to that. Hardware sensors and features. GPS allows you to take advantage of your GPS, your NFC. Okay, so a lot of acronyms here. GPS is for location. NFC is near field communication, so you can exchange data just by having two phones in proximity with each other. Okay. Bluetooth, okay, all of those features out of the box available. And then you have development and debug tools, which I will show shortly. Okay. All right. Before I proceed with the actual tool or with the actual dev kit, any questions or comments so far? None? Okay. Yeah, let's reserve that for later. Yeah, I disable your mouse. Okay. People who have programmed in Java are probably familiar with this IDE. So this is, I believe, the latest version of the Eclipse IDE. Okay. It's Juno. The version is Juno. And this is already configured to have the Eclipse Android plugin. so that you can easily create applications for Android without going through too many command lines and such. Okay, this is the first tool that you will see, or that this is often what you will be seeing when you code in Android. Okay, now I have here a very simple application. Okay, I tried to give it as many functions as I can given the time, but so as you can see, Java is going to be Java. It's all just, at least for a certain type of application, it's all just Java and XML. Okay. This particular application is just a modified version of Hello World, and it's really just composed of a couple of files, at least the ones that I wrote. The rest are auto-generated. Couple of files for the actual screens, and then these two XMLs which show you the layout of the UI. So I have one layout for this screen and another layout for another screen. Okay? And this is all just written. The tool provides you a graphical layout tool so that you can physically arrange, drag and drop widgets and layouts next to each other. So this is the first step in designing an application. You create the user interface, okay? You lay it out, okay? And it can be done graphically via this tool, or you can edit it directly. The layouting system itself is very similar to how you would lay out HTML. Okay? So you have the container layout, and then you have the various widgets. Okay? I have 3 buttons here, 1 text view, 1 editable text view. Okay? And if you look at that from the graphical layout, it's these 3. Okay? So that's how easy it is to create a user interface, or at least one screen. Okay? Now, layouting screens is one thing. How about their behaviors? A user interface that doesn't do anything is not much, is not very interesting. So each layout is associated with a Java file. Okay? And this gives this provides the behavior. Okay? So these are lifecycle methods on create. And of particular interest would be these 4 methods here. Those of you who are Java can probably see the code is very simple. It's not very arcane. Okay? It's very straightforward. Okay? Toast here is a function is a method to show a pop-up. Okay? Text view. Okay? So just a cursory reading of this, if you are an experienced Java developer, you will see. Okay? It's very similar to many of the other frameworks that you probably use when developing applications. Swing, for example, or other desktop apps. Okay? So what does this do? These 4 methods here, these are the event handlers for the UI. Okay? So when and how do I specify that? You see that here. When this button is clicked, I call say hello toast. When this button is clicked, I call say hello label. And when this button is clicked, I call say hello next screen. And their actual functions are these methods here. Okay? Again, very simple. Okay? I'll show you the actual app. This is another tool that is provided by the SDK. This is a software emulator that you can use to simulate a variety of phones and tablets, form factors, and resolutions. so that you can test out your application without actually having to go for an actual device. But of course, when you having a device, of course, is optimal. It's faster to test. You get more actual results. Okay. But in absence of that, an emulator is very close. Now, sorry, the resolution. It's just the screen resolution won't let me. So this particular emulator is running 4.1. Okay. Okay. The screen resolution won't actually let you see, but okay, if I click this, okay. Okay. And then the third one will move us to the next screen where we show the same label and a simple graphic. So this was all done in the span of, let's say, half an hour. So very simple. Even with just knowledge of this, you can already create apps. There's no need, no, well, this doesn't have any background processes or anything. But just knowledge of activities and screens, you can already accomplish a lot. Okay. Okay. So these are your tools. If you're a Java developer, you should already have this. Just download the Eclipse plugin. Just download the various SDKs. They're maintained in something called an SDK manager for you. Where is that? Here you go. Okay. So this is what you need to download as well. Here are the various SDKs for the different Android versions that are available. So depending on what you want to target, you'll have to download the appropriate version. So if you're planning on targeting Gingerbread, for example, then you must have the appropriate SDK version for Gingerbread. The emulator that I'm running right now is running Jelly Bean 4.1. Okay. Now, let's go back. Now, when you're developing applications for Android, there are a few things you have to keep in mind. If you're a web developer or if you're an enterprise developer, your applications typically go into the backend, go into servers, very powerful servers. One thing here to remember, or even if you're a desktop developer, your applications will be deployed on a device or on a laptop or on a desktop, which is technically very powerful. Even though phones today have progressed so much that this phone here is much more powerful than the than the computer that was used on Apollo 11. It still has limitations. Okay, at least for modern day applications. One is you have to keep in mind that developing in Android and developing in mobile in general is that you are constrained by the constant limitation of resources. Okay? You are not running servers with racks and racks of servers with a large amount of memory, a large amount of RAM, and a near infinite amount of hard disk space. So when developing in Android or developing in any mobile application is a practice, is a balance of balancing features and performance on one side with the hardware limitations on the other. And the first hardware limitation you'll reach is the processing power. Now, given the fact that the phones today are already very powerful, this particular phone is a dual-core 1 gigahertz. I mean, just 10 years ago, desktops were, if you had a if you had a 200 megahertz desktop 10 or 15 years ago, that was already top of the line. This and that desktop would probably occupy this entire table, and then have a large monitor, have a large tower, and at best probably 640K B of memory. So, regardless, CPU is something that you have to keep in mind. CPU cycles, because phones by nature, of course, are consumer devices. And one thing that consumers don't like is the perception that your application is slow or that your application is jittery, but you must also balance that with the perception that your application is a processor hog. Okay? Next is storage availability. Now, most phones, Android is less susceptible to this because most devices allow for expandable storage, but a typical phone will have at least 8 gigabytes of extended storage. And then it progressively gets more expensive the more storage you want. Okay? But this also means that you have a constraint on the amount, on the size of your application. Okay? If you have desktops, you're probably used to installing applications that are 300, 400, 500 megabyte applications, and you would not give it a second thought. If you publish an application and it's 500 megabytes or even 1 gigabyte, most people will give it a second thought. Most people will stop and look, why is it occupying that much space? Why is it occupying 200, 300 meg of my precious 8 gig? Okay? And 200, 300 meg is precious if you have just 8 gig, considering that most people also use their phones for music, for video, for photos, and the size of which can ramp up very quickly. So small applications are premium. Okay? The third, and probably a very sticky point here, is applications must also be very conscious of how much power they consume. Okay? When I install an application, okay, I can immediately, I notice that it's draining my battery. Okay? No matter how good that application is, no matter how fully featured that is, a dead phone is a useless phone. Okay? So you have to be careful. You have to be wary of making sure that your battery does not, that your application does not consume too much battery. What are the typical culprits of this? It's tied to processing power. If you if you consume the CPU too much, if you're doing so much processing, that consumes battery. If you're doing a lot of background processes all the time, for whatever reason, that consumes battery. If your application is reliant on GPS, like every 5 seconds, for some reason it tries to get your GPS location because it wants a very granular notification of shops or coupons near you, that will drain your that will drain your battery. So it has to be a balance. You have to balance the features that your application provides versus, of course, the power consumption of that application. Again, nobody wants an application. Nobody wants a phone that is dead halfway through the day. Okay? Most people's limit is that whatever application I have, a phone should last me at least over a day, a little over a day, before I have to recharge it again. If my phone is not reaching that, and I start hunting for applications that might be consuming too much power. Okay. Fourth is data cost. Okay. What do I mean by this? Again, one of the main reasons why smartphones are so powerful is that they're connected, meaning they have access to resources beyond the phone, via the cloud, via networks, via servers. Okay? But that has to be balanced as well with a certain cost. Data usage is not free. Okay? A typical data plan will consume, give an application free reign and it will keep on downloading data. For every byte that you download, for every byte that you send, for every minute that you're on, that you're sending data, that is cost that is being passed to the consumer. Okay? And again, nobody wants an application, or it's a very bad user experience for a user to get his bill and then find out that he's been running 20, 30,000 pesos worth of data usage bills because there is an application that is constantly sending and downloading. Okay, so you have to balance that. So these are some of the things that you have to keep in mind when when you develop and when you start to think about the apps that you want to build. Start thinking about designing your application. It's not a free for all. You're not running your applications on a server or a powerful desktop. Okay, despite the advances that we've had for the past few years, it's still a very limited environment. So it's going to be a balance of design, performance, and cost. Okay, other considerations. I told you before that the Jelly Bean is now the latest version in Android. But if you also remember this chart, there are several other versions. Okay, one of the key things that plagued or that has been assaulting Android development for the past few years is the F word. Okay? The F word in Android development is what? Anybody know what that term is? Or have you heard? It's fragmentation. Okay? That is the dreaded F word for Android. And it's true, it's whether or not it's true to a certain degree, it is happening. Apps that were built for a certain version may not always be guaranteed to work for other versions. Okay, so testing, okay, having a good set of actual devices to test your application is crucial in Android. Okay. Okay. Now, also remember that you're not just limited to tablets and phones. You also have all those other devices. Okay. The more devices, and since you have a large number of devices that you might be able to support, also means your development and testing costs run up appropriately. Okay, so depending on where you want to focus on, investment on an actual device or an actual good device that can simulate all of these, or that you can test on, is crucial. Okay. All right. So there's a there's an overview of what Android development is, or what Android is, and how to get started in Android, and how to consider what things you have to consider in Android development. So I think that's all right. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. So, if you have any questions, you may approach the mics at the center. Any questions for Mr. Chuck? Eugene Lozada. David.
My question is, how do you? I've heard that you can run like Ubuntu or a Linux OS on an Android. Do you know how to do that? Is it hard or is it easy?
It's something you have to work on, but yeah. Eventually, these devices are just ARM devices. If I've seen Linux run on devices that were never meant to run Linux, or that were never, or Android run in desktops, Android, and I've seen Ubuntu also run on various hardware. So it's something that I don't have knowledge of top of my mind, but you deploy an OS, you figure out the drivers, and hope it works. That's how most people do it. It's not, you won't find any solid documentation on it. It's really something that you, even without Ubuntu, for example, installing Linux in general is, at least the time when I was still doing it, I heard it's much better now. I used to try to install Linux on whatever spare PC I have or I can find. It's mostly just driver hunting.
All right.
Earlier, you showed a sample of the emulator. So, what if we want, and the emulator looks similar to somewhat a swing application, and it looks so basic. But what if we want to edit the look and feel? Do we have, for example, for web we have CSS. How about for Android? Because what we saw earlier were XML configurations in Java files.
You want to change the layout or
Yeah, or
style it.
yeah.
It's the same. It's very CSS-like. You
Okay.
still also still do it in XML. If sorry, I can't show. It's shut down right now. But things like background, padding, what the images will be in the corner, the things that you expect in CSS, they're supported by the XML layout.
Okay.
So if you want to style it some more, give it different colors, or even change the what graphic will be displayed when you do the button. Or there's also nothing stopping you from creating something called custom views, which is, let's say you have a button, you want to give it your own look and feel and behavior. It's Java, so and in Android, the button is just a class, so you just subclass it and then give it your own behavior.
So another thing about form validation. So is it similar to JSF components wherein they have their own validations, or Android has, how do we do form validations in Android
Oh,
application?
the first level is the widgets themselves. Depending on the type of widget that you choose, you can actually restrict the input. So if say you can put an email widget or a number widget, it will restrict entry to the appropriate type.
Okay.
The second is in the activity. The activity is where you code the behavior. That's your, you can do it there. But Android is free-form, so if you have a validation framework, you can plug it in and then call it from the activities, the event handlers, and then do the appropriate response based on that.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Mike. I'd like to ask, how do you support backward compatibility? You mentioned we should download the image for the most popular version of Android. What if we code for the latest one and just add backward compatibility?
Well, the rule is you don't specify a maximum. You almost always target a minimum. So when you start developing, when you create the app or they create the project, you select what the target build is. So let's say the target build that I select is 2.3. So that means it should be a guarantee that gingerbread and above, it should work. But very rarely do you specify a higher target unless you really want the features of that higher version. In most cases, in most utility applications, for example, the common ones like wallets or calendars, you just need the basic features. Every level or every version of Android has what you call an API level. I think Jelly Bean is API level 14. Yeah? So unless there's really something in API level 14 that you really, really need, then just go for the lower ones. If you code something in 2.3, in Android 2.3, it's more or less going to be compatible with any of the higher versions. It's going to be fine. So the rule is, this is the rule of the minimum. If you don't need it, if you don't need something from a higher version, then go lower. So that's the best way you can provide compatibility. Try not to specify a maximum version. You only specify the minimum lang.
Is there a possible way to deploy multiple APK versions, one for each Android version?
An APK, for example, the APK that I ran, I ran it across multiple versions. It's the same code, it's the same APK. I copied it physically and then deployed it, it's fine. You don't need to build, for example, if I wrote the project in Android 2.3, there's a chance that the APK that I generated for Android 2.3 can still work in Jelly Bean. So I don't need to create a custom build every time. There's a chance that the same APK that you have ported across different devices with different versions, and they'll still work fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. Any more questions? There.
Hello, my name is Noel from APC. My question is about, or can you give us tips or recommendation on how to create an Android application that can remotely control home appliances like TV, ref, aircon, etc.?
Okay, there's actually a Google project for that, and it is based on Android. I think I forgot the name. It's something at home, but there is a Google project. It's not officially released that is used to, which has exactly that goal, which is to enable a smart home. Um, Other than that, though, if you can target, you can still develop for, let's say, a gaming console, or you can also develop for TVs that support Android. It's not going to be exactly controlled, but the architecture is something that it's going to be more. It's something that needs to be discussed more than on a Q&A. But definitely, what you are thinking about, that is already something on the radar by Google, and it is something that they want to happen. They want Android to be pervasive in the home. They want Android to be a system where you can control devices, control appliances. It's coming. It's not something I can design offhand, but it's gonna get there eventually.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a license fee or developer's fee in creating and deploying an Android app?
Okay, very good question, because that's if there's something that aside from myself, of course, being a Java developer, that's actually also one of the reasons why learning Android has such a low barrier of entry compared to iOS. One is the Java language. Second is the tools are open sourced, freely available. And the SDK, you can download it as many times as you want. There's no fee. Unlike in, let's say, iOS, where you have to pay for a 99 dev fee to get the license to publish. And you also need a Mac. You're restricted on developing on a Mac. In Android, you can use whatever you want. It goes again with the theme of Android, that they want to be open. Google does not want to control you. They want to give you options. So in terms of fee, no. Unless, of course, you don't have your own computer, you don't need to shell out anything to start developing Android apps.
Additional question. Could you give us an idea of the salary range of an Android app developer?
Probably something out of my scope, but I would say something. One thing is that, take note. Unless you're working for corporate, where developers in the Philippines are still not allowed to have merchant accounts in Google, meaning you can deploy apps, but you deploy them for free. The last country that was given permission to sell is India. I would assume it will get here eventually. But all right, to your question, salary. One thing I'll say, mobile is the next step. I mean, the IT industry has been marked by very clear stages. You had mainframe and banks before, panahon ni Sir JP. Then you have the internet, okay, web. And then you had cloud. Then you have mobile. Okay, it's going back. There are phases to it, and mobile is where it is now. I mean, web, mainframe, they're all still there, but the hot topic now is mobility. So demand is definitely going to be there. Sorry.
Have you tried running those kinds of stuff in a Mac PC?
If the tools are available for Mac,
Yes.
yes, they are. And some people actually prefer developing in Android on Mac because the tools are faster.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
if you have a Mac, Eclipse, the Android SDK, Java, they're all available for Mac.
Okay. Thank you.
What determines the scrolling of the
Android device, the screen, it's like in iPhone you scroll it left to right, right?
Uh,
But in Android you have a choice of up or down and left to right.
it can be whatever your home screen launcher wants. It's again, nothing is fixed in Android. If
Will there be
yeah,
infringement of patent if you develop left to right,
okay.
sideways?
That patent question is something that again probably a long conversation. I personally do not believe in those kinds of patents, but no, I mean it's not something we have to worry about.
My question is, can you cite at least 3 Java resources for mashup?
Uh, Almost any framework, JSF, Google Web Toolkit, even plain JavaScript. Okay, it's not related to Android, but almost any framework can be used. Any Java web framework can be used to create portals or mashups.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lozada. A round of applause for him, please.